Your alumni love helping students and fellow graduates, but they simply don't have time to attend every event, answer every call, or learn yet another online platform. With Protopia, making an impact is easier than it's ever been before. Ever. There's no new app to sign up for or use in our already busy lives. Students, alumni, or even staff can quickly ask for advice or networking via a simple form, email, or text. Protopia's artificial intelligence searches the institution's existing alumni data to find the best experts that are the most likely to assist based on experience, availability, location, and other factors. Each matched alum receives a direct, blind email to ask them to help, giving alumni full control over if and how they want to respond, whether that's by email, call, or a virtual meeting. And if it's not a good time, Protopia's AI simply reaches out to the next alum until the question has been answered. The student receives advice right into her email inbox and is coached to engage the alum to grow her professional network. Finally, our rich dashboard lets staff follow along, view detailed engagement analytics, and access updated alumni data. Protopia. Simple for them, simple for you.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to Alumless for Friday, February 28th, 2025. This is the Managing Up, Down, All Around edition. I am Ryan Catherwood, and I am joined by CMAC CEO, Chris Marshall. What's going on, sir?
Hey, Ryan. How are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. Beautiful Friday in the world here. Glad you're having a good one, too. On the show, we're talking about constituent engagement strategies and education advancement. If you're tuning in, please let us know about it in the comments of the LinkedIn event. That helps us more people find the show, but it also allows us the chance to answer any questions that you might have. Myself or Chris or our special guest today, Sarah Kathryn Ricci from Baylor University. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast edition of Alumless to hear our 30-minute bonus segment with all of our special guests, including Sarah Kathryn. And we're grateful for you for adding the podcast to your feed. We appreciate you. And of course, we appreciate Max Lyson and the team at Protopia for their partnership with us and being a presenting sponsor of Alumless. All right, Chris, we're going to talk a little bit about management today. And we in our prep for the show, we were kind of realizing we hadn't dug very deep into the subject of management and leadership. So excited today for the show and to talk with Sarah Kathryn about that. But let's start with you, right? I mean, we haven't dedicated a show to it, but would you describe a specific management style to yourself?
I've been asked this question before, and I like to think of it as a leadership style personally. I know there's a difference between leadership and management. We can get into that conversation, but for me, mine is, if I had to describe it, I would say lead and then get out of the way. And let the people, my role as a leader is to remove obstacles from folks so they can get their work done and flourish with their own skill sets. And I will say that when I'm at both stops at Lehigh and at Cornell, my style was a little different in that I was a micromanager at first, for anyone, all the way through both tenures. And then once I knew the person could do the work, and I had confidence they could, but once I knew they understood what I was expecting exactly, then I just let them go. Sometimes it took a day, and sometimes it took 3 months. But at first, I usually get in the midst, get my hands in, get dirty, and then get out of the way and let them do their thing. And that's the most important thing I think a leader can do is support and provide, clarity in where we want to get to overall, but move things out of the person's way to help to get their work done effectively.
We're going to talk today about some approaches to managing, of course, our direct reports, but not exclusively when we think of managing, not necessarily entirely about direct reports. There's managing across, right?
Yep.
Our peers across the institution. There's managing up, right? There's our vice presidents or other AVPs, or even depending on who you are, if you're listening, the president or the cabinet level of the university. And of course, there's managing even outward, right? across our volunteers. So there's a lot of thinking to do there. But I guess, do you have any particular lessons learned from your tenures at Lehigh or Cornell in the management area?
I learned to manage up when I was at Lehigh in an athletics role. I learned to manage down at Lehigh when I was in the alumni role, and I learned to manage across when I was at a place that was very complex, and you had colleagues and partners you had to collaborate with when I was at Cornell in the alumni role. And the most significant learning moment for me in that was early in my tenure. Charlie Flager, the vice president at the time, who's now at Virginia Tech, about to retire from Virginia Tech, phenomenal manager, phenomenal leader, and learned a ton from him. But he's the one who sort of showed me, you got to look to your left, look to your right, and make sure your colleagues at the leadership table understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and make sure they're involved in the decision making. One of the steps he took, he sent me to a week-long leadership course at the Center for Creative Leadership, CCL. I have the pen here in front of me I got from it. There was a pin, and this is their little logo. And it was a week-long experience where you actually got to look into the science and the practical learning that comes with what it means to up, down, manage, and then left and right. And it was a transformational moment in my development as a leader to spend that week immersed in that program. So CCL, Center for Creative Leadership, I give them big marks. Not a cheap experience, but it was well worth the investment. I can tell you that.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like a good one. Write that down, everybody listening. And thanks for those of you who are tuning in. Lots of comments there already, which is fantastic. And of course, to our colleague Kim Infanti for managing the CMAC LinkedIn commentary. We're grateful. All right. Well, let's bring out Sarah Kathryn Ricci from Baylor University. Sarah Kathryn is the Assistant Vice President for Alumni Engagement and Annual Giving at Baylor University. Sarah Kathryn, so good to have you.
Thanks so much for having me on today.
Yeah. Good to see you again.
It's great to see you.
You guys were together.
What's
just
the temperature?
I
was there a week ago, and it was 13 degrees, Ryan, in Waco. What is it today?
The high will be 75, I believe. So, we like to swing from extreme to extreme. I think that's
quite a bit more pleasant today.
Yeah, it's apropos for our management conversation, which we don't want to go from extreme to extreme.
Yes, even keeled indeed. All right. So, Sarah Kathryn, I asked Chris the question about sort of management philosophy. I guess I wanted to kick things off with the same question to you, which is, in broad terms, how would you describe your management style, and has it changed at all over time?
Well, yes, it has changed over time. But I think one thing as I think about what kind of manager or leader, however you define the two, is important to know yourself. So for those of you who are Enneagram people, I'm a 5, so that's the investigator. So I really like to have all of the information at hand. So I think as I started out, I probably was more of a micromanager, not to really control everyone else, but because I was trying to learn everything. As I've continued on and worked with a variety of different people and a variety of different Enneagram numbers, or, Myers-Briggs types, or, as you think about the DISC model, whatever you'd like to see, I think the goal in management for me is to really become more transformational. And while I don't think that I'm quite there yet, I really am truly trying to figure out how to provide my employees or encourage them to reach their goals and push them out of their comfort zones. Because I think that we all know change is always inevitable, and people go from place to place. And so the best thing that you can provide the others around you is how to think through their work critically, and continue to advocate for themselves in the programs that they lead.
Yeah, it sounds, sort of the idea of helping to create a scaffolding, right? And let people kind of fill in that with a bit of instruction, a bit of design, and some direction. But I guess one of the trickiest aspects of leadership is managing up, right? It's, making sure we're on the same wavelength and we're adjusting to the styles and preferences of those who we report to. How do you approach influencing and gaining support from senior leadership there in advancement?
Well, I think one of the things that I learned early on is to not assume. I think we all know the cliches around assuming, but before you go and try to influence up, I think it's important to know, what is the goal? What does success look like? Because if you don't know those two things, it's really difficult to have the conversations of managing up and advocating for those who are on your team and what you're trying to accomplish. I think that's the simplest kind of piece. But also, as you are managing up, we tend to lead with feelings, which leads to truly burying the lead. Our managers are busy people. They are thinking in strategy, and to lead with feelings instead of, hey, this is a very quick idea that I want to talk to you about, and this is why, you'll lose them and invite them into the weeds where you definitely don't necessarily want everybody to live.
I definitely remember in my last role really thinking through and even asking for affirmation around particular communication patterns and the way and the topics in which I brought up, right? And over the course of time, you kind of learn which things need to be escalated, right? And which things can be saved for the next time you meet in person versus when you got to hit that text message, right? And make sure that you get a quick response or get your supervisor, the VP, perhaps looped into that question, right?
Yep.
Such a great point. I remember vividly in my first few months at Cornell, in my role at Lehigh, I reported to the president, and I didn't have the title, but I operated like a vice president. I didn't have to clear a lot. I just did what I wanted. So I get to Cornell and I begin to operate that same way. And I'm off planning this retreat. We're going to go do this stuff. And I brought it to my VP. It was fully baked and ready. He goes, when were you going to tell me this? I was like, oh, okay. Complete recalibration of what I need to do and when, and the sequence of it. So it's a really interesting moment in my learning. I'm going to go back to script here, SK here, and alumni engagement, annual giving. You oversee both shops, both distinct goals. I mean, of course, they blend together, and you've mentioned goals in your comments a couple times, but both, we're looking at different metrics and measurements. How do you manage a team that's working across both functions like that?
Well, it's really helpful that CASE has come out with alumni engagement metrics. Because now our teams can
feel a bit, right?
They can actually see where they fit into that constituent journey. And really, as we think about managing those teams and, managing down and leading those groups, it's about helping them understand their why, where they live on that journey, and that someone can enter the journey at any stage. And how to find those areas of overlap. And in that area of overlap, how do we work together to maximize what our outcome should really be? And then to feel comfortable saying, this is your role and this is my role, and being vulnerable enough to let it go. Because I think what we've all said at some point in the short time we've been talking so far is that when you don't know, you tend to micromanage. And that's generally earlier in your career than later. So that's what I would see. But I think that too, even managing those two teams, we live in a very small community within the world of university advancement. So being able to sit down with those teams and talk about what we do and how we do it and the resources that they have available, so they become more confident in the work that they're producing. They won't hold on to as much, and will begin to partner and collaborate more.
Let me jump in with an off script here, Ryan, because I think it builds into the question you have teed up next. And something I observed, Sarah Kathryn, when I was down there last week, is that my sense from the team and you to the team, there's a high level of trust.
Yes.
And when there's trust, communications can happen and clarity comes, and there's just it's the foundation of everything. And have you done things specifically to try to build trust? Is it just something you do naturally? I mean, has it been a thoughtful thing, or just sort of a natural thing for you?
You know what? Trust is something that I work very hard on. I don't naturally trust people.
You gotta earn it, right?
Maybe that's a terrible thing to say, but I mean, knowing yourself is important.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I
Right.
think that from the trust standpoint, if I am going to give you a task to do, I need to learn to trust that you will do it. And leading with, until you break that trust, I am going to expect that you'll do it.
Yeah. Right.
And so I think that also there's this notion of treating people like adults. They're not independent contractors, but when you treat people like adults, they tend to act like adults.
Yep.
But I also, I'm a big reader. And one of the things that I do think that has built trust is that I'm trying to learn to be more vulnerable. And so for our team, I think that's also important. And there's an author named Louise Penny. She has a series of books and, it's a mystery writer. But one of her main characters, the thing that he talks about with his team the most, there are 4 things that he always says. And it is, I'm sorry, I need help, I was wrong, and I don't know. And if you were comfortable enough to say that to your team, who's like, well, why don't you know?
Yeah, right.
I think they start to realize that it's okay to be a little bit more vulnerable too.
Yep. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
But I'm glad that they showed you that we are a trusting group.
I could sense it. And so I had meetings with the full group. I had meetings with a board, but I also had time with just the annual giving team without you in the room and just the alumni team without you in the room. And that's where I picked up on this. It felt to me that there was, and of course you and I spent time together, so I could feel both directions that there was high level of trust in the organization. It's good to see that.
I suppose the notion of trust.
Please go ahead.
That is also something that you learn from those that you work with. So I too have a manager that I trust immensely.
Yeah.
And so to have that back and forth, there's really a strong environment for it.
I was just going to say the notion of micromanagement during periods of change or during inflection points is really about establishing more trust, right?
Yep.
Both more communication, more meetings, more verbalizing expectations. Chris, I think you mentioned that sometimes, like when you work with clients and you're just getting to know them, right? And you're trying to set the stage for the weeks and months to come, you tend to be more of a micromanager in those earliest phases. And I found myself, at least in my last role, kind of in that same vein, because you want to get to that point where you trust that people will make the right decisions, that if you give them a task, they'll do it and do it well, but you kind of have to set the stage for that, right? And perhaps in the onset.
Yeah, great point.
So, Sarah Kathryn, university advancement requires, of course, working across multiple departments, right? What strategies have helped ensure a smooth collaboration between alumni engagement, annual giving, and maybe the major gifts team? How do you think about working with your peers who lead those teams?
Working across advancement actually, in my opinion here, has been fairly easy. I know that's not the case for everyone. And it certainly wasn't the case earlier in my career, especially working in more of a decentralized model. I do think that it helped, coming to Baylor, and we were growing together. There's also a culture at Baylor called Baylor Nice. So we tend to all come to the table and smile often. It doesn't always mean that everything always feels authentic and genuine. Sometimes that's just kind of a cover for, we don't want to have that difficult conversation right now. But I do think that our former VP, Dave Rosselli, who's now at Belmont, leaned into us and said, you all should be bringing these topics to the table. You should be having difficult conversations. And difficult conversations aren't yelling. It is about saying, I have this perspective. You may have another perspective. Help me understand what you are seeing, and I can help you understand what I am seeing. Because I think with our team specifically, we are very aware of what the donor life cycle looks like. We have multiple people inside our advancement shop that have worked in all areas of advancement. I have people on partners on the major gift side who have worked in prospect management and also worked in annual giving, some in prospect management that have worked in alumni engagement. Our VP even has experience across the board. And I think when you have teams and you've built them with that experience in mind, it's helpful. But going back to prior roles, when you don't have that level of experience, and again, going back to that trust, I think it really is about stopping and asking and understanding the why behind someone. Again, leading less with the emotion and asking questions. And I said this about managing up. I think it applies to everyone, whether we're talking to alums or to our partners across campus. What is your goal and what does success look like? I think if you lead with those questions all the time, you can really get to the crux of what people are trying to accomplish, and know how you and what value proposition you bring to the table.
Let's kind of unpack the idea of providing feedback a little bit more. It's definitely a crucial element. It can be difficult, of course. How do you ensure that feedback is received, positively, as positively as possible when you're perhaps providing, critique, if you will, and then make sure it leads to growth? And what have you learned about providing feedback?
Oh, that's been a really tough one. People have to be ready to hear feedback. And what is difficult about that is sometimes we don't have the luxury of time, because feedback sometimes has to be immediate.
Yep.
Knowing who your team is, knowing how they take information in is incredibly important, especially when you're moving fast. If you can move a little bit slower, and prep them for that, that's helpful. But I do think that I do think with feedback, when you're moving quickly, if people know who you are and how you operate, and the intent behind your words, that's helpful. One of my team members, she and I get along swimmingly because she's direct, I'm direct. If I have a problem, I just address it head on with her. And she does the same thing with me. Oftentimes people look into our office because I'm behind a glass wall and they think that we're arguing. And we walk out and they're like, is everything okay? We're like, well, yes, of course. Why wouldn't it be? But the same way, how I deliver that information to her is so very different than I deliver information to another direct report, who's definitely different, who definitely leads more with emotion, instead of direct. And so kind of understanding why people are feeling the way they are helps me deliver information in a way that they will not just hear the words, but listen to what we're trying to accomplish.
That all starts, though, the ability to have those kinds of conversations, understand the differences, starts with trust. I really keep going back to that term, is if you have that high level of trust, no matter what their style is, you can move slow if needed, or emotionally if needed, or fast if you have to, because you guys trust each other and the outcomes on that. I think it's part of that whole equation.
And to that point, it took me a long time to figure, and again, admittedly, I have an issue with trust, but I've had to figure out, I had to be vulnerable with other people. I tried to figure out how other people responded, because we're dealing with behaviors. Even in alumni engagement, annual giving, advancement as a whole, I mean, we're all just dealing with behaviors. It was difficult to always deal with other people's emotions and how they like to take things in. And I realized a missing part of that equation is I never shared with any of my team how I like to talk about things, or what my facial expressions might mean, and to not take them as personally as they were taking them. So there's some ownership on knowing who you are and being comfortable with that.
How long into your career in the leadership role did it take you to come to that realization right there?
Oh my gosh, probably within the last 12 to 18 months.
Is that right?
So it's new and fresh. So I'm working through this little hypothesis. If we want to gather together again in a year, I can let you know how it's going.
I love Chris. I have a current consulting client, thought partner relationship that just arrived at the institution where I'm working, and she described the management styles of her previous leader versus the current one, almost polar opposites, right? And so that's been a real adjustment, and sort of working with that person to sort of think about like how to take a different course, different tact.
Uh-oh.
Oh, you broke out, Ryan. We lost your audio. We can see you and can see that you're talking, but your audio went. Nope, you're still gone. I want to take it, Ryan.
Well, I was going to add to that, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping in, Chris.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
But I do think that is an important point. When you have two people that are polar opposites, is that a place where you lean in, or are people backing away?
Right.
And I will say in this journey and how I got to being more vulnerable on some of these things and trying to trust and, leading with who I am, was really about leaning into the people that were so inherently different from me. Because if you're only having the people and you're responding only to the people that think like you and act like you, think about how many perspectives you're missing.
Right.
And I think that's something that I've found super helpful. And the people that I've learned the most from, and that I respect the most, are the ones that are polar opposites.
Yeah. Yep.
Am I back now, guys? Can you hear
are
me?
back. Yeah, you're back.
I feel like I just had too many browsers open or something. My computer was straining, too many windows or whatever. But you guys did a lovely job covering.
Sarah Kathryn, that was great. You're on the show once, and you already covered it. It's perfect. Fill in the blank. I love it.
I've been in plenty of situations where someone's needed to cover for me.
Yeah, well done. But Ryan,
Well,
go
ahead and answer
what you were
question.
teeing up, but you want to finish, then I have a follow-up.
Well, I was just going to ask you, how do you think about managing those coaching moments where you're trying to help maybe it's a new AE leader or an advancement vice president sort of consider management styles as part of your efforts to provide sort of coaching?
Yeah, people have heard me, almost everyone I worked with, I probably said this sentence to at some point. I'm a big believer, as I've gotten older and I've become more my authentic self at the age of 58, I stopped caring what people think about me, and I am authentic and I am candid, and sometimes brutally so. And I always tell people, the sentence I always use is candor accelerates the process. If you can cut to the chase of what it is you're trying to get to and be candid, it usually works in many styles, and people often appreciate that kind of clarity. And if you can do it with kindness and authenticity, so you put those all together, that's what I talk about all the time with clients, is helping them understand as a leader, as a manager, that being candid, clear, kind, and authentic are all traits that I think your people are going to want, whether it's up, down, or across the organization. That's kind of how I frame it, Ryan. I want to go back to something you mentioned, Sarah Kathryn, in your comments about the qualities you look for in people, like when you're hiring, for example. I mean, if you hire people that are exactly like you, it's kind of you're going to know it's a boring work environment. And you're not going to get the variety and the diversity of the thought that comes with having different types of people. But so what do you look for? What are the attributes you look for in qualities and staff, skill sets, experiences?
That's a really tough question. And my gut says that it depends on the role.
It's a good consultant answer, by the way. I love that.
Yeah, it depends.
At the start, it depends on the role, and it also depends who else you have in the office.
Yeah, great point.
I do see a part of my job as making sure that we have people that are filling the gaps where we're lacking strengths. I hate to keep going back to this, but knowing who you are is very helpful in that process.
Yep.
But if you're just looking at just generically, let's have an interview. Some of the people that stand out to me are those who are willing to look you in the eye, to ask questions, and not just questions to ask questions, but are willing to ask a question for the sake of dialogue, because those who are trying to dialogue with you in some of those interviews, if you think about the questions that they ask, those who stand out to me are the ones who are trying to get to the why. Even if we work differently, as you have people that you work with, if they understand the why behind what they do, we can teach the other skills that they need to succeed in the higher ed environment.
Yeah, I love that answer, and I'll build on it and say it's a similar version of what I used to say. The people I look for, what skill sets do you need, fill what role, all depends. But overall, though, I want people who understand and can do the assigned tasks. They know what the job requires to do, and they're going to get that part done. But when you give a task to somebody, there's a set of implied tasks that come with it. And if we can hire people, I have found that if you hire people who understand what the implied tasks are, they're going to kill it, because the assigned tasks are easy for that kind of person, right? And that's what I look for. And so that's the why part for me. I love the way you said it, though, Sarah Kathryn. Good stuff.
Yeah, to the point about asking good questions, I always look for people who are really curious about the work, who during an interview process had made it clear like that they were fascinated by what we were doing, and they were really interested. But all right, so we bumped up against the end of our half hour.
Quick, yeah.
We're to go. But so before we record our bonus segment with Sarah Kathryn, why don't you tease our next episodes here?
Yeah, so next week on Alumless World, we have Joe Gardner. Joe was the Director of Alumni Engagement at Imperial College London. So this is a really cool guest. And the guest list on both our shows are fantastic, but the folks you're bringing in the world are bringing really cool perspectives and different thoughts. So I love that Joe's able to join us. And then 2 weeks from now, Davey Norris, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Louisiana Tech University Foundation and Senior Vice President at Louisiana Tech. They recently merged their advancement with their innovation center. And so really interesting conversation coming up with Davey in a couple of weeks from now. So those are the next 2 guests coming up on Alumless.
Yeah, some good shows coming up. Well, thank you so much for joining us and adding Alumless to your work week or the weekend or whenever you're listening to us. Thanks again to Max Leiston and the folks at Protopia for their sponsorship of the show. And we'll be back for the podcast listeners just after a word from our friends at Protopia. Everybody else, we'll see you again here on LinkedIn next Friday. Take care.